there's any members of the public here, we're at our third Board of Selectmen workshop regarding the budget. So I think really we just kind of have to make some decisions here and put a final package together. So I took the initiative of putting a proposal on the table. I sent it around to the board a little bit ago. And I just did some, reflection over the weekend about that, the town with the referendums passing, the 2 bonding referendums passing, I think, really puts us on a slightly different path than we might have been the other way. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to have this earlier in the process versus before. And so to focus a little bit more about tightening the belt in some ways for some of the operating expenses. And, just reflecting on that list again of requests, and I've tried to prioritize a little differently. So maybe I can share that and we can talk a little bit about it.
That's good because I didn't expect that. Looks like Bruce did that research.
You don't want my, not all my scribbles.
Chicken scratch. Who's better than you, by the way?
I'll watch it on my computer.
You can share.
I have.
You need one?
You have another one of those?
No, but I can get one for you.
Oh, I can use this. Okay.
No.
Oh, well, she's gonna put it on the screen.
Yeah, I'm sharing it right now. That's why I logged on here.
Do you want one?
You want one now?
You want one?
For you.
I will. I'll go get it. I'll get it. You can make notes. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay. So I think that when I kind of went through these requests again, and I know we had a number of great conversations about them and the merit, and they're all merited. So this is not a reflection that we feel these are unmerited at all, but we're kind of looking at it through a new lens. And I just kind of went through and tried to figure out, okay, so what kind of increases were being asked in some of the line items, and then what were some of the staff requests. And I kind of wanted to say, okay, we know we want to focus more on public safety, and we all agreed that we need to add some more police resources. And so I'll start with kind of the recommendation I came down to on the police, since this is the largest that has the most impactful. And I felt like 2 officers was quite a significant increase to the force, right? And it gives us an opportunity. It's a realistic goal considering they have a number of vacancies that they have to fill. And then this would be another 2 new officers on top of that as of July 1st. And I thought, as we see how the year goes this next year, the board can revisit next year if we want to support the 3rd officer. So I thought that gives a little flexibility to see how things are going, but it gives a strong commitment to the police department, giving them pretty much most of their requests.
It's a net increase.
It's a net increase, absolutely. And it's still an additional roughly $180,000. So that's where I kind of came out in the police department, and that was something the board had discussed. And if you want, I can go through each line item if it's helpful. Some of these we talked about, some of them we didn't. But Beach and Rec, it was split. They had $10,000 in plan and cycle maintenance, and I kind of went back to their budget and realized that 10 grand was like 18% increase in the budget. And I said, okay, let's just step back, understanding that I think it's been underfunded a little bit over the years too. But rather than do the catch up all at once, let's take our time. And I kind of picked a 5% number, which is basically twice the cost of living adjustment that we've been using. And I applied that 5% to some other line items too. So I came up with, increasing the plan and cycle maintenance by 5%. And then I included the concert.
It's actually larger than the total increase too, if you think about it. So.
Right, well, no, so, and then I gave, right, and then I also did include the full amount of the Salt Meadow concerts. So this was a request, the Salt Meadow, I checked the Boston last night. And I recognized this was actually, they really want to beef up the activity at that park to get use out of it, and they made a special request for that money to fund that concert series. So I put in the $5,000.
And if they can get sponsorship, so be it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So then, but at least they've got money to work with, they can plan on actually having a concert.
Not to exceed.
And then I took the item for Rockland that was trail markers and stuff, and I said, that's kind of a one-off, and I threw that on the list for ARPA, because that's our theme of improving our outdoor amenities and our playgrounds, and that's one we can easily cover through ARPA. It's not a recurring expense. So, building, official, I know that he wanted to have some additional hours, and I recognize that.
One of my pages type random, so I love it. Please, sorry.
That's okay, so the building department, we know we're gonna be doing this reorganization, and part of the goals of that reorganization is to start sharing services across departments. So what I'd like to do is, if Vinny feels he needs additional support outside of the regular hours of his assistant, maybe there's an opportunity to cross-share. Because some departments are gonna be super busy and others are not gonna be so busy. So with the new reorg, kind of putting this under the town operations division, I thought he might have the opportunity to get additional assistance from other admins. So we're gonna work on that. We'll see how it goes this year. And if he comes back next year and says, no, I really still need that, then we can look at it again for next year's.
But Peggy, let me just ask you, do you hear from all those land use departments, do you hear all of them saying this, and they really are here some extra hours that they can share, or share?
I think we've always made it work, because we did that a lot during the pandemic. We chipped in, and that was another of my thought process with the town clerk and the elections. We had beach and rack staff, senior services staff, we had a lot of people helping out. And what's nice is they can log onto the system at their desk, they can help process things, and she was able to train people quickly, so, that's not ideal on a recurring basis, but I think when you have those moments when people are swamped.
Piece of that.
Exactly, so it's kind of trying to help assist with that. The fire marshal, I think, was one where, I talked with Sam again about it, and I feel like if this really becomes a problem, there's some, his thought process is that he's got the Bradley Road project that's gonna be happening, there's gonna be some new development coming online that they're gonna have to,
What was the fire marshal for the top of the head?
Just hours. I think.
just hours, extra hours, that's all, not extra people, just extra hours. So I feel like if that's really a problem, and once again, we're having this reorganization, so.
8 weeks. I think so. 52 weeks, 8 per week.
Per week, yeah, it was adding like an extra day or so. I think we kind of had these conversations with this department over the last 2 years. He did get an increase in hours before, and so I felt like, let's just see how it goes. I think this board has always been very accommodating if we realize, wow, they're snowed under, they really need it. And that happened with the town clerk last year. We did kind of look and say, I don't want to do that, but, if there's evidence to show that there's really this huge influx, then we would support that. So I just kind of, I kind of left that there. The health department, like I said, this is replacing part-time admin that was always there. And that's another clerical position that in theory can help out with the other departments, right? So that person has always been there, but it was a full-time person, and now we're replacing with a part-time person. So I supported that, but the other thing we talked about was the sanitarium, and that was one we'd always thought it was more ARPA related, so I put that on the ARPA list. And then HR, I kind of went back and looked at I think we realized like the staff development and stuff, that was kind of a unusual request because most departments don't have like these travel budgets. And so I left that out. She was asking for like $3,000 for postings. I looked back, her budget is actually 2, so I said, well, let's just double her budget. So she's gonna have a budget twice as big as what she's got right
What do you mean
now.
her budget was 1, going to get?
No, her budget was 2,000, and she was asking for 3, so I just gave her 2,000 because I thought it was just kind of an odd. Madison Hose and North Madison Nomad, I basically took what their previous years was and grew it at 5%. And so they were asking for 10% increases in both of their budgets. I gave them a 5%. Showing commitment, more than the cost of living, because I know a lot of that was to deal with just additional training costs and stuff. Police we talked about, registrars, I think that's when we know we have to just increase the rates that we're paying, they're more underpaid relative to our peers. Tax collector, that was another thing where I thought if, the idea was like, they go to conferences, so they can do it at the same time, and to me, that's kind of managing staff. And then if they need assistance at the desk at times, that's when we have staff rotating into share across departments with that. So we can talk more with her about trying to get her some additional support with the staff we have. Town clerk, I basically focused on, she had 2 buckets. One was increasing staff hours, which is needed for absentee ballots, and the other one was adding an additional person for those hours. So she'd have more people working, and that's where I said, well, let's try like what we did before, where if you're really swamped, we can pull in Anna from Beach and Rec, or Sarah, and they can spend a day processing applications and pull offline or something because we were able to make that work really well last year. And then youth and family, I think the impression I got from Scott was, the current support council, the problem with that, you're now committing to a full-time position. And I think we want to be mindful of making big commitments in those types of roles going forward. He was able to find a staff somebody, I think, for the part-time position. But he does have 2 staff members that need to be regraded. And this would have to still go through the JDC, but I recognize why he feels that they're really underpaid for what they're doing, and this is these are people who provide mental health services for schools. So I thought it was important. You want to treat people fairly, make sure they're paid fairly. So I left that one in, that request in. And so that's kind of how I came up with this. And then, and so basically cuts the request in half. And then one thought I had, and this is where if we go to really I'll go to this slide, which is what does this mean for the budget? If you look at just going with this and going with the CIP recommendation, obviously it shows a continued, which has been my goal since I was elected, is to keep chipping away at the operating budget, managing it. And obviously there's a million things that factor into that, but so we see a nice decrease in the growth of the operating budget.
You just wanted to me, and I really don't, and I think you talk about it here, recommend budget, consider redirecting any additional budget increase from operating to capital. What are you thinking there? What am I missing?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is if we're comfortable, when I showed in the previous presentation, if we gave everybody what they wanted, right, our mill rate was still going up around 1%, which is a very reasonable number. So if we're okay with that mill rate, rather than putting all that into the operating requests, let's take some of that and actually put it into capital for saving for the future.
So we get more out of it.
Right, so we get more out of it, exactly, for the
So
future,
it's
right?
okay,
So we're like keeping down our fixed cost base, and we're actually helping us set ourselves up for what we're gonna have to pay for debt service is gonna be coming on. It helps us keep our fund the capital budget in the future, right?
Okay.
So and this is something that I think Stacy has worked hard on, and what the finance had talked about with that that regulation where you would kind of commit a certain amount of money from the budget into capital. So this is ultimately this would be a Board of Finance decision, but we can make a recommendation. So in addition to doing the 275, which is what CIP was recommending, right? We would do another 275, which is roughly the amount that we are cutting out of the operating requests, right? Roughly. And that would get you to a total budget that, a mill rate growth rate, kind of in line. So, so that was kind of the thinking behind that, and it's an idea that, now is the time to squirrel away as much money as we can to accommodate for this future capital cost.
Can you just explain the last one? What does it mean about no fund balance? What does that mean?
So on the bottom, I added, and actually I should have done rid of this.
Yeah, look at the fine print.
I just realized that these don't apply here. So the top line, oops, where it is? The top line.
You don't put 750 in there.
Right, there's no 750, the 1.87, and I forgot to include this.
So that is different, and I know you weren't the first one that did it, I think Tom did it too, when she said, but the Board of Selectmen, I don't think ever put any money from the fund balance, and it was always done at the next level, because there's no rate thing. So that's kind of new.
Right.
No,
Well, it's
I
just
shouldn't say new, different than what
We
I
made
was used to.
recommendations.
Well, yeah, and this is just making a recommendation,
Yeah, so it's a
so,
calculation with an eye to the request.
Well, but when we talk to the public, we use that percentage, that's what, we tend to use the percentage with the 750 included.
Oh, I think we pretty consistently use both.
yeah, I think it's
I
always
think-
been
I
there.
agree.
I think we pretty
Right,
consistently
right,
said,
yeah.
this is what it is without this, what we're recommending or requesting, and this is what it is with, so,
Right.
I mean,
But it's something we never did before, it was something that, I don't know, maybe from
we
us.
were innovators.
I don't think they used
What's
mill rate.
Yeah, we were.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, was Board of Finance, it would.
Bruce and I are just gonna take credit.
But you know what, as a layperson,
Yeah.
I was always wondering, when you give that percentage, what does it include or what doesn't? It wasn't always clear, that's all. You heard me harp on it, I don't know. What I'm saying.
Well, and so, yeah, so this is just to give an idea, like I said, this conversation will continue with the Board of Finance, and they would ultimately make those decisions, I think, but I was just trying to give you a little context of, you know, and we could decide not to even touch that issue and just leave it, but I just was trying to put it out there
Well,
as
he's
an
got a
idea.
history doing it.
Well, and just so we've had this conversation in the past, Bruce and I certainly have over the years, but rules of the road here. So we make a recommendation to the Board of Finance. They can change the dollar amount in total, but not the line items, correct?
They can do line
They
items.
So they can actually
Yeah.
say yay or nay on
Not
each,
for the education budget.
but not on
for
the
town,
education
right,
budget, right?
right. So they can go in and do line items.
For this current term.
Yeah. And so I think part of this is also saying, hey, okay, you may not like this, but if you look at the overall picture, you know, it's actually, so this was kind of, you know, like I said, we could, you know, I don't know how the board feels with, my suggested, you know, amendments here to the requests for the budget, and then,
Well, Peggy, when I read, thank you for doing that work, I think it was great, it was a good starting point for us. When I read it, I started to look, first of all, we're making an assumption with the reorganization that you gave us, that is in the budget already, you've got that in,
Right.
right? So that's
the
40,
salaries.
that's 45,000. Right. We just, I had a thought on this. Human services. We don't have a human services director, and you know, I've been asking around. It is it's a tough market for every field. But the chances of us finding a human services director for a town this size, I think our chances are slim. We only had that one great candidate at the end there because Amy Deb knew him when got him and found out that when Deb took the job, I didn't know this, Amy Dickman went after her.
You're talking about an HR director?
What am I calling it?
You call it human services.
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
talking-
you're right.
I'm thinking youth and family services.
You're right, I'm sorry.
I'm in a different department.
I'm talking about
Okay. HR director.
HR director, I'm sorry, I wonder why I was looking at me. So anyway, and I think that towns like Madison, having a HR manager is very sufficient, I think a lot of towns do. So when you look at that, what we budgeted for was both a director and a manager, and it's $196,000. If we really took a look at that department, I bet you could get some of this money back. I'm thinking really of the fire department and stuff with the training mostly, and whatever. But and really, there's money there that I think we could take a look at. The idea that we're putting in $196,000 for two people, and there's a good chance we're not going to find one of them. And way in, the question is, do we need both? Do we need to go to that level? And,
I think it's a pretty big department in the sense of complexity of the unions. I think
no, but I'm not the union, but I'll tell you, I talked to Deb about it. And she came, she was a manager. She might have been a generalist. And at some point she could, and she said,
she was always our HR director. She was always.
wasn't director, she was generalist and manager. Yeah, I never worked with her, but this was, she told me. And anyway, I think Thelma moved up to director, I think, whatever.
She's always been director for me.
Yeah, anyway, and she said to me, really, she said, the places that are posting are like water areas. They're posting, someone with those credentials are gonna go there. She said, I really do believe that Madison really could use a good manager. And it would save us some money that we could either take off the budget or maybe we could put a few couple of these things back in. I like that discussion, but I just thought of it, it's money that I think is gonna sit there for a while. And it's a department that I think we've got to start thinking
You have
about.
an RFP already, right? Isn't there already?
No, because I'm actually taking a hard look at that position. And to be honest, what I would like of that position is somebody who's going to think a little bit with a different background. And that's what I like about Jean, but Jean is available in a couple months possibly. But because I want to relook at our compensation structure, the way we evaluate our employees. I want to kind of, start applying some of the private sector discipline that's out there to
But if you
municipal
look
discipline.
at Paula's credentials, they are beyond Jean's, they're beyond Deb's. I mean, she's got certification and everything.
So, I think one of the things that, well, and I would rather not get into a specific discussion, but one of the things that is, the things I'm always looking for when we hire is somebody that can go into multiple roles. And as we go through this first reorganization, there's also gonna be succession planning, as well as some other needs, because we have our facilities director, will be retiring, he's been staying on to assist us through this, but, we're gonna have some,
Pretty big gaps,
leadership.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
so,
we've got 3 years of Sam and that's all.
so,
And there you
that's
go,
clear.
and that's another one, right?
so I'm looking at this role is, slightly differently, and that's why I'm taking some time, because I think what we put out there in December was pretty much a traditional package that went out that Deb wrote, kind of replacing somebody with her background, but I'm looking at it a little bit differently. So, and trying to expand things, I think we need to look very much at a lot of our strategy, our compensation. In that sense, I think it's important to have resources available for a hire that it may not look like a Deb, it might look a little different. Deb was a strategic player though too. She thought strategically, and so you need somebody who can kind of step in and do that, right?
And she's highly recommended somebody.
I would advocate that we leave the budget as is, and then we work through what the longer term management structure would be, which is something I'm focused on.
Well, and I think when it comes to job descriptions, obviously it's something the selectmen or board were very interested in, and I think we've got somebody that's been working for 2 months now, and we haven't, we're asking her to do a lot of work, and I know we've been doing it in other departments too, because I've been hearing about it from other departments too. I just think there's an opportunity here to really rethink it, like you are, and I'm just thinking in a different way, that we have something very adequate, and you've got confidence from staff, you've got confidence from the unions. That to me is all important, very important for smooth sailing. So it's just, I thought it was just an idea.
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept, right? Because in the normal operating budget, we're funding an MTC, and then on the other side, we're not fulfilling these other stated needs. And so I think your point is well brought up. I think the difficulty here is, I don't know how much, we had one executive session about what your goals are. It's very well camouflaged in the budget. You gave us details, but I think in the actual
When I
budget.
mentioned today that it was in the budget, it was in the budget, where's in the budget?
But this budget is presented the way it's always been budgeted.
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying it just doesn't, it's not readily
Yeah.
apparent.
Right.
What
I think we thought we'd have another
So
discussion
the
about
question
it.
is how do we talk about all of this in the context of the budget?
In a public hearing.
Yeah,
And,
tick,
and,
tick,
and,
tick,
and
tick,
a half
tick.
hour away from having to make a decision.
Well, I think also keep in mind that the kind of management decisions are ones that normally I need to go over. I'm the one that makes those decisions about staff.
Right, but
So,
Right, but we vote on
question.
budget.
we have to, and job
And so-
descriptions.
And I'm arguing that I think we need the director of human resources position to stay in the budget.
I would
That's
also,
why
I would also
presented
suggest too that that's something that we probably should have brought up a month ago, 2 months ago. That's a pretty big change to re-steer the budget. I mean, I think it's a great idea,
Well,
but we probably should have
Yeah,
explored it
you
a
know what,
month
tell you
ago.
the truth, I think Bruce and I thought, I know we talked about being in the budget, but it was never brought up again. He was surprised when I said today, it's gotta be in the budget. He goes, no, it's not in the budget, the 45,000. So we, just didn't understand
Right,
that it
yeah,
was the
no,
budget, got a
you sent us the
discussion.
numbers in January.
Yeah.
So without knowing exactly what the future model is gonna be, I think we need to have the resources available in the budget. So, because we don't know what we're shopping for yet, I think.
Yeah, I think to give her the latitude to be able to operate.
So I think,
And it could be that we may end up,
Spending it.
right, and we've also had other positions where it took more time to fill, and we end up, the money comes back to the town at the end of the year, it's not due.
But it's, because
It's a budget.
general fund, it's
Yeah,
still tax.
but I'm just saying, I mean, that happens all the time. We've had other positions, we have a land use position right now that she went out and we had a land use, a whole land use department was approved last year, and then the director left, and we have a new person in, and so she's going to be, she's gone out and it's hard to find qualified candidates right now, but
It is.
that'll go away. I mean, I think it's, going through a little bit of a tightening right now in the labor market, but.
I think certain fields, so I was sitting in the car on the way into interview this team, and I was talking to someone who's an HR specialist. And without meeting him, my thought was, this is too fast for only one person, we should wait. And I said it, and this person said, yeah, you're crazy. I said, if he's a good candidate, grab him. It is so tough out there in that field, particularly to get really good people. You know, I just think, you brought it up the other day, I think we all agree that we want a nice message to the town with those referendums, that we took it seriously, and to be able to fund $116,000. That's not, we're not gonna give the whole $117,000 salary that we don't know we're gonna be able to fill. And really, we have someone that's doing the job. I just think that, I don't know,
She's not
problem with it.
She's not doing a director job.
Well, maybe manager job is what we need.
Well,
She's
I'm
doing
just
both
saying,
jobs, that's.
no, she's not. So she's not doing director.
Guys, I think that, to me, this is an
Yeah.
executive session,
Right.
so we're talking about a
Yeah.
specific person,
Yeah,
that's not really fair.
you're right.
So, I mean, I do like the concept of TDP with the normal operating budget, but a couple of questions about this. The building position, so this represents a commitment not to fund that this fiscal year. So no, middle of the year, I really can't make.
Well, the building, like I said, we have, to me, it's administrative hours, so I feel like we can manage that.
And the fire marshal, same thing, no, you know. they're not here
That's
this
one
year.
where I will say that if there's a safety issue in the field, if they're so behind, that might be a conversation, but.
Well, you
But-
could put a few of these little things in and spend $38,000. If you can find $38,000, we can put them in.
I mean, yeah, so
It's not a lot of
I'm
money.
concerned that we're cutting things that in 4 or 5 months or 6 months, we're gonna be doing special votes to add back in.
Or we get us by for a year.
I put a proposal out here to try to be thoughtful about it.
Right, and I'm clarifying.
Well, we appreciate it.
So,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying, it's discussion, I mean, you know, like I said, the building official is administrative hours. Fire marshal is a little more unique, so one could argue that that is, you know, Sam feels it is necessary because there's a bunch of projects. But I guess I step back and I say, is that sustainable? You know, and like, we're gonna see, you know, is this something we wanna build into the budget and then we'll continue to do? That's the, so.
And with the fire marshal
that-
thing, with Sam taking a new job on, bigger role, is that even more
So-
reason to fund it or less?
Well, but in that, account, there is additional hours for the deputy, so we've accommodated for the fact that we're doing.
In the reorg itself.
Right, in the real good stuff, so it addresses that.
And we have a new person in here, this is the new secretary, whatever, up for $65,000.
We're also, adding a grant person, which is something that already responds. The grant, I mean, today we're actually putting a grant proposal together for something we're having today, so. So that's where it's
There's money
shifting
out there.
resources, and we're also eliminating a position in finance, so.
The additional CIP, the 275, are you expecting that would then be a recurring 275 every year?
Well, that's just the capital budget that's the committee approved with the package.
So you've got an additional.
You're done.
No,
double
the other
funding.
275, no, that was, well, that's the thing, so you would keep that, now you've built up the base, and then you would have another increase after that, possibly, we'd have to make that decision next year. I know Stacy would recommend probably keeping to build that account up as much as we can while keeping taxes at a reasonable level until the debt service starts. That's a whole discussion that she wants to have with the finance, but,
Is the idea there to use those funds to pay debt?
you cannot use it to pay debt, but you can use it to not have to put as much of the CIP later. So,
So this is saving.
yeah, we're saving up for other capital projects, so that does it, so it frees up the budget. in the future.
It's sort of analogous to occasionally we make an extra payment into the pension plan.
Right, so I get that, so why not make a request of Board of Finance, hey, we want to give $1 million out of the excess fund balance and throw it into CIP, that's fine.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
And they still may do that.
right, and for all, that was originally, that's what we did last year, we took 270, they pulled the CIP increase out of the budget. And so flat funded it last So CIP did not have
Right.
and they did it in infusion instead. And so, and we did, and that was on top of another infusion, I think, that we had recommended. So that's gonna be a conversation about how do we keep taking advantage of where we, what obligations we have now, what we have the other fund balance, and keeping up that account. I just put this out here as a, hey, I'm recommending a number that is basically whatever goes for the additional budget. So it's going somewhere. It's taking it, rather than going to the operating budget, it's going to the capital budget, that's all. And it could be just, we can just make a recommendation to the Board of Finance on the determination. There's a lot of scenarios that they can go through, and it involves the debt service projections, and I've sat down with Stacey and talked through some of this, but she's got a whole model projecting when the debt service is gonna start coming in, and we just wanna make sure that we can take other things and, reduce the need, that will help us absorb the debt service.
The thought process of the 5 and 10 was because that's the savings.
Yeah, pretty much, I
Down the road
rounded the number, yeah, I rounded the number between the 550 and the 660.
So Peggy, if you want me to chime in on the whole capital and additional funding, I fully support it. I actually, like you said, would recommend a little bit more because I do have a potential plan that will be coming forward later on. But the whole issue is we can infuse whatever we want, which will help decrease future budgets for capital, but it's not going to increase the base going forward. And we have a lot of debt in the upcoming years coming on. I think almost close to $7 million of additional debt in 1 year. So the plan is to kind of build up the base, start saving for capital. So when the debt does come on board, we can reduce the funding into the CIP. So I totally support not only 275, 781, but an additional 275 at this point. I actually came up with a bigger number, but I'm not going to go there. So.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to try to build up the base, get as much as we can into the CIP, knowing that the capital debt, the debt service for the big projects are coming on board soon.
Stace, can you just clarify though, for next year though, would that be our new starting point? So we'd be, 5 something into CIP next year as opposed
Yes.
to 75?
Yes.
Or
So
maybe elevating the total.
the plan is to fund CIP as much as we can in the next couple of years before the big debt comes on board. It starts in 23, 24, and then slowly comes on board over the next few years. So if we can start to fund CIP a little bit more, build up the base, and then when the debt fully comes on, we can then decrease the CIP funding to offset that. So it won't be such a big shock, to people in the mill rate impact.
It makes perfect sense. The problem is that, the operating budget.
Sorry, I can't hear you guys well.
Couple of large.
No, this is just a increase in the operating budget. It's a well thought out increase to the budget.
We cut the 275 and now we're adding it back in.
But it's,
I'm with it.
I see. Stacy, can I ask you a question? What about general fund? Well, I know there was talk early on about that we really are, it's higher than it should be. What do you think of that? Do you have any thoughts on what we could do, what we should do?
Yeah, absolutely. I could do a whole analysis on what we can infuse from the general fund into CIP, as well as building up the budget base. So for me, when I did a 10-year outlook, looking at the oncoming debt service based on cash flows and the debt service projections, I actually came up with a bigger number this year, as well as the next couple of years. But as you know, it's nothing new. We plan all the time. We put in extra money right now so we can buy a fire truck in year 5. So that's what the analysis is based on. But right now, regardless of, or not talking about a special appropriation in CIP, building up the budget base is also a piece of the puzzle. So I would support this, at least this 275. into it, as well as we'll talk about the special appropriation from fund balance moving forward. But just infusing money from fund balance isn't going to help us, Noreen, when we have to budget for the debt service when it comes on board. You know, all of a sudden, now we have to increase our budget base for this debt service. So I feel like we need, or at least the analysis that I did, we need to slowly increase our budget base as well as infusing money from our unassigned fund balance, like you said. So I think it's kind of like we have to balance it all. So, but I would definitely support the 275, if not more, for this upcoming year.
You know, building up the budget base, almost contrary to most of the way most of us think, I mean, we're thinking, but I always felt that whatever you could do to make, not allow fluctuations, be up and down, so that it was consistent. Yep. Especially if you could be paying down some debt and then you could incur new debt. But you're saying that we should just, you know, I never liked the fact that the Board of Ed would take their savings from capital, from debts, and as it went down, they would take, now maybe I'm wrong, and correct me, say if I'm wrong, but it seemed like they would take those dollars and use them to build up the operating budget. But you're saying that was a good thing to do.
Well, I'm saying we had no choice. There were years when the debt service came up after the high school, you know, was fully up and running and the debt service came up, and the Board of Ed had to absorb that increase as well. Going forward, as you know, we talked about the debt is going to be on the town side. And the problem is we have to budget for that debt service no matter what. So I think, and I totally agree with you saying that should be separate, but so should capital. So capital and debt service, we can take that aside. That was part of that regulation that we tried to get to implement a few years ago, to look at the two of those and kind of, you know, balance the two. So knowing that debt will come on in a few years, let's build up the capital, and then we could, or the pay as you go, so to speak, then we could decrease it as the debt comes on. And that's kind of the approach that we're still following. So looking at the operating, I do agree, Noreen, we should keep that separate, but right now we need to figure out how to budget for 105 million of debt service coming up in the next few years, you know. So, but and I can certainly present at your next workshop a plan on how to smooth this out, because my number one priority is to not have those ebbs and flows in the mill rate. That's just not, it's not doable for taxpayers, and they need a steady, you know, future, and they need to budget for themselves. So I think we have a potential plan that we can run by you, but for now, I think we'll be better off if we start to budget more into the capital, knowing that this debt service is coming up.
This is planning for the debt service.
Correct, yep.
So long as that planning money comes off, when the debt comes off.
Well, there you go.
And that's, so what the Board of Ed did was they did it on the back end. What we're doing is we're doing it on the front end. We're building up the operating expense for capital ahead of it. And what is the mechanism for rolling off of that?
It's always hard to bring it back.
It never happens, and that's the problem.
I mean, you saw that in the Board of Ed, that wasn't.
So the one thing is we are, like I am trying to show you guys that we're not really building up the operating, we're building up the capital pay as you go. So the more we put into CIP, pay as you go right now, when the debt comes on, we can drop that. And then in 10 years, in the 10-year projection that we did, you will see that eventually we'll be able to figure out additional bond issuance. Do we want to, you know, are there more? There's still a lot of capital projects out there. As you know, the Board of Ed, it's not only the 89 million, there's another 40 million in Daniel Hand and Polson. There's also the Surf Club. There's a lot more projects that we need to fund going forward. So the more we put into CIP, it's not going anywhere. We can always change our plan, but it's protected in CIP. And then, you know, for the plan that we know right now, and then when debt comes on, we'll try to adjust and move forward and modify, you know, the outer years.
So back to what you said originally, Stacy. Peggy put in the 275, actually the CIP talked about it, and you were saying that if you had your brother, you'd have that times two?
Yes, I think
I'm
that's.
sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Maybe that in there.
oh, there's 275 already in there, this is the
Yeah,
second step,
correct.
okay, got it. Okay,
Yeah, I definitely support the 275 that the committee recommended, and I definitely support the additional 275. Again, you know, we can infuse as much as we want, but eventually we're gonna need to budget for this debt service. So if we get the space up and the debt service comes on, we can then reduce the budget for this CIP.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
I think we're all mindful of the time here. We need to keep pushing on to, Peggy, I like what you presented. It balances lots of competing things. It's got the typo back. More of the page 2. Things you're suggesting, or I guess I'm trying to test the rest of us to see whether we're there or not. So
well, do we all feel comfortable with, Peggy's got a great list here, as I said, we're wrong, but anything discussed today that makes us feel like we should have to reinstate any of this money? I mean, no one has that problem, just, I know you talked to Phil about training, and do you think it's?
Yeah, so I mean, my concerns, and by the way, Lorraine said it, and I'll say it, I really appreciate the work you put into this and the way you organize it. My concern is that the building hours, the fire marshal hours, those are coming back. That need is real.
You think they're gonna come back and ask us for more?
And we're gonna be faced with an out of cycle ask, which is my least favorite thing in the world.
I heard you say that.
So I guess as we sit, I don't have any real faith that these are real
It
cuts.
only happened once, but that was the town clerk with all the election stuff going on during COVID.
And nobody could have
Yeah,
predicted that.
at least under my watch.
Yeah, that would be the health department too.
No, that was the, okay, well, we have retirement, and so we, funded it through our.
So regardless of the number of cuts,
Yeah.
it's still my least favorite thing.
Well,
So
maybe what we do is we set the expectation that we can't have people coming back this year.
No,
Even the budget is tight.
But I mean, safety
Unless
is
it's a-
safety. If the fire marshal
Unless
has
it's a safety
obligation, and so I can't in good faith cut the 12 with the prospect for me, or with the real prospect that we're going to be faced with. I need the 12 as safety.
But it sounded like Sam was comfortable, right?
I talked to Sam, I mean, look, I think if he wanted to give himself that back, I don't think, I think he just wants an extra out, he wants a bump, right, because there's a lot going on in town. So if we could give him half of it, that's it.
You're saying for the fire marshal?
So there's an additional 4 hours, but I don't, it doesn't, look, end of the day, you know, we were making a recommendation to the board of finance, and based on all the numbers that we've seen, we're gonna be in a decent range anyway, because of the grant list, right? And so I'm just trying to be mindful that when you talk about the hours will come back, well, you know, it's, you know, once they're there, they're hard to take it back, right? So that's the other thing. So you're just continuing to roll forward and build the base, which is what we do with the CIP and everything else. So.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we give Sam at least half the, I'm okay with giving him half back. You guys cool with that?
that could be good, Bruce.
The listed industry is $6,000 to $12,000 in a $30 million budget. I mean,
Rounding error, 2 point.
it's not even that. Ship the couches.
It starts adding up, that's the thing, I think
All
once
the
again,
pennies
is
start
to
adding
your
up,
point,
that's the problem.
we could add the 12 back, is there other changes that
You're doing for some and not for others, I mean, it's.
I was just trying to kind of be consistent.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, you did work on it. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the logic. I guess, yeah, no, I'm not there, Al. I think it's where you were headed with all this. not comfortable with all of the changes. Is it too late to do a sweeping 1% reduction to last year's operating budget to create $250,000 room for some of these new things that are
We're down to
roughly $550,000, right?
It's gonna have it back in there. About half, not half.
I think we have to draw the line somewhere too. I mean, at the end of the day, some of these are wishes and not needs. To move the needle forward with the town. So I think we have to be conscious of some of them are wishes.
Can I ask a question, Stacy, since you're there? The tax collector, I don't remember what the 11,000 was, but obviously since that department's moving over, those four, are you okay with that?
I'm just opening up the additional budget request. Hang on, Noreen. I think, so she's looking for part-time clerk for office support year-round. I think they're busy. They work hard. There's only 2 people in there. There's a lot of times when, one or both of them are gone. Can they use the hours? Sure. I mean, to Peggy's point, can we grab someone from somewhere else? Probably. We'll just need to spend the time training the person. So, and just one last thing is they really have not asked for money ever. Like they pretty much, have used what they're given and don't complain. So I don't know if we do have extra staff around town hall and we could train them to be available, that's wonderful. But I'm not sure if that's, the right answer, if that's what you guys want to do. So yeah, I can't answer your question.
Well, if there's a problem with it, you're gonna be handling it.
I'm sorry?
I said if there's a problem with it next year, you're gonna have to address it.
Yeah, then I'm gonna have to figure it out, and I'm gonna have to, work with the staff that we have and try to find somebody to help them out. And as always, we'll figure it out.
Very good at.
And I can't really hear you guys, so I don't know if anybody's talking.
I think this really comes down to, like I said, every request has merit. It comes down to a question of really want it. So it is a way to.
And there's probably 10 different ways to go.
Yeah, exactly, that's the problem. I mean,
I mean, the
go to
1%,
base
we've
of the
talked about some
budget,
of those
you go to
ideas,
this. I look at these as things as they, the departments functioned great last year. Everybody did extraordinary work and they didn't have any of this. So I look at this as like things that I try to focus on. Most
Real needs.
Because of realistic things that we're doing. It's training costs, and then the police department obviously is the big one here. It's big that we're making to the police department, to the officers. So I'm not quite sure how we want to go forward.
Well, at some point we have to vote. And to extend on your earlier thought, we have to send something for finance. What we're really doing is sending it on to the taxpayers. This is we're not setting the budget. The taxpayers are going to have the opportunity to vote on it. And our process is that we move things forward.
Thoughtful way. Yeah.
Sometimes it's interpreted as an endorsement or not, but I think every budget that's happened has had things in it that each of us didn't like.
Of course. Yeah. Absolutely. Exactly.
And I think it's important that gets called out. We're not going through on a one-hour basis.
But not to be trite, but at the end of the day, I think that certainly the taxpayers need to be the most comfortable with the budget. But I think you, as sort of the operating manager of the town, I think you need to be the most comfortable that your staff is prepared to do the work that you needed to do.
And you can hire them and you can find them, exactly.
It's all of the above, yeah.
What's the dollar amount increase this year? On the downside?
Since
Well, I didn't put it in this. Oh, here we go. Well, we did everything, right? We didn't only one,
Which is sort of where we've been,
for the operating budget.
if I just operating them. We've been to 1.1 to 1.4 for the last, like, stuff.
Well, this is actually, then if you don't do all the budget requests at one, what's the number without the budget requests? I don't have the.
Well, I mean, I have your proposal thing.
Your recommendation
Yeah,
is just operating, is 831.
That's actually the lowest in 5 years.
we were fortunate we had a few work in our favor for the first time. I mean, I think to Bruce's point, we've always had one problem child, right? It was the ambulance for two, and it took us 2 or 3 budgets to kind of get there. And we had the
took us
library.
2 or 3 before we.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, amen.
So, and then we had the library, right? That was over several budget cycles. The police department, we're getting them going, and we might have another. So, but we're kind of weaning through a lot of them. I feel like we've gotten to a good inflection point. So, so
It's all, as you said, it's all got merit. It's just a shame that it's a huge referendum, which is exciting, but also two together is pretty scary to present to anybody.
yeah, and
And
I
this
just,
is the easy year.
Oh,
This is the
Yeah,
easy budget
yeah,
year.
yeah.
This is
It's just the
it's just gonna
message
get harder from here. And I think that's one of the reasons why I end up on making the investment in the police the 2.5 now, because that hard conversation this year becomes almost impossible next year. With, we're looking at $7 million of debt service that we've got to take on. In one shot, that's gonna hurt. And it's gonna put a lot of pressure on this budget. So,
See, I guess I don't agree with that. I think 2 is a lot in 1 year, and then we look to have a conversation about another one if in fact it's needed. But because of the retirements and the empty spots right now, I think they have a lot of spots to fill right now and go to work. So to me, there's a lot of fluidity going on in that department right now. To add 2 more vacancies, 2 more spots they have to fill, whether it's through the police academy or not, or through state retirements. I think it's going to be a challenge regardless. So just to fill them in this 1 year time period. So I think moving towards the 2.5 to 3, I think it's going to be next to impossible.
Well, I think one of the things he said to us was, there's just X amount of seats at the academy,
Correct.
and you gotta grab them, but you
Yeah.
can't grab them once you know you have the money, so at
Right.
least we're gonna allow them to grab too.
I
I
agree.
mean, and that's if you, there's food, the only thing you put our
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm just going on face value of the presentation. This is what we need.
Yep.
This is our modified, it was 3 July 1st, it's now 2.5 fiscal year.
I just know factually, budget request 101, you ask for a little more than what you think you're gonna get, because you're actually gonna get a little less, so I guess that's where I'd still come back to the 2.
that's sort of
No, I was fine, I was actually 1.5, I was.
Yeah, I was kind of with you, Dorothy.
1.5.
I was with you.
1.5.
Stacey, you want to share something? Go ahead, she was mentioning. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Stacy.
Sorry, I was talking to myself. If we're gonna make a vote, I just wanted to pull up the dollars based on what Peggy had recommended. I can also change now that we have 5 minutes and modify what you need. But right now, based on what Peggy said, these are the 2 numbers. We need to make 2 motions for the town budget and the Board of Ed budget, because the public hearing is tomorrow night.
Let's to Bruce's point though, let's add in something.
Wednesday night.
Let's add in something.
Oh, we gotta balance, we gotta find.
Grab 6. Let's do 6.
What do you want to do?
Let's add 6 to Sam.
6 to Sam?
Yeah.
Is that it?
That's all I'd suggest. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, hang on.
One thing, though, the number that you have, Stacy, includes the extra capital. Do we want to make that, do we want to put that as part of our vote? Or do
I'm
we-
sorry, I can't hear you. What's that?
I'm saying the number that you got up on the next page includes additional 275, correct?
Yes, are we gonna include that?
So do you want us to include that as part of our recommendation, or do you just want to not have it part of the actual vote?
Yeah, so I do have the 275 in the front page. I just want to, let me just make sure I have the 6 coming forward. Hang on one sec. So 542. And then this number does include the 275. Are we good with that?
Well, that's the question is, do we keep the 275 in the vote or do we do it outside the vote?
The only votes we need to make is the town total budget and then the Board of Ed total budget. So right now, I'm gonna, so you guys decide if you want me to include this 275.
You're suggesting leave it at 275.
That's my recommendation, but that's not my call.
That's fine.
But we're voting on 2 separate
Yes.
budgets.
Yes.
Stacy, what is the actual language of the vote you would like to see us use?
I don't have that with me, but it would basically be to approve the town of Madison budget and recommend to the Board of Finance of the 30,629,416, and as well as the Board of Ed budget of 60,255,417, and that would be a recommendation to the Board of Finance.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the town budget of $30,629,416 to the Board of Finance.
There's the 6,000 in there that you put in there.
Yes, you included the 6, right?
I put in the 6. Yep.
Was 2504.
Krista just confirmed it too.
Does anybody else want to second this? If not, I will.
And that is with everything, that's 255, the debt, capital, everything.
Correct.
Yes.
Al seconded.
Al?
Yep.
All in favor?
Well, discussion.
What is the, can you give me the percentage increase?
So, right on the
Right on the
screen.
screen. 514.
It should be pretty much
Oh,
close
it
to what it should be.
is, you got 5,
It's 6,000.
And what is the, and the town budget alone is 3 point.
The town is the 514, and then all in both together is the 2.81.
The operating budget.
Right now, we're just voting on the town of 30,629,416 for a 5.14% increase.
The increase in the town budget, downside, is actually dollar-wise, is less than it's been in 5 years. See something that's gonna,
Yeah, we like good news.
at least that's, I've been found it's been 1.4 years.
Excluding the
So
We are
275.
now at.
This is just town.
All right, so let's vote.
So do,
Good.
Any more
You guys gotta get to
Okay,
all
all
the
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I am unfortunately not doing this.
Sorry, is there an opposed?
One opposed with Bruce.
Okay.
Okay, and then a vote for the Board of Ed.
I'll make a motion to support the Board of Ed budget of 6255,417, sending it to the finance.
Second that.
Bruce seconded it.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No, those unanimous? Okay, great.
Unanimous.
Stacy, just double check this, because why is the the operating budget is 3.46, okay, yeah, that's all right. Roughly what I had.
She's good.
Okay,
Just good.
We're good.
Okay. So the only one other thing, do you guys want to make a motion, and you don't have to, but do you want to make a motion to recommend to the Board of Finance to designate 750,000 or some other number out of fund balance? You don't have to because it's their call anyway, but do you want to make a recommendation to do that?
What would be a suggested number? Would it be 750?
Well, that's what it was last year. I mean, these numbers would change a little bit because of the 6,000.
I recommend this now. We've got,
Just make a motion.
I move to recommend to the Board of Finance, $750,000 of undesignated fund balance be used to offset development.
Who?
Noreen.
Noreen.
Okay, and any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, opposed, yep.
Bruce opposed.
Got it.
Hold on.
Note that we have, what, $18 million in fund balance right now? Yeah. It's like 19
And we
million.
just got done hearing how many capital projects we have. But instead we're buying down the operating costs. We can't do that
All right,
forever.
assume your seats.
No, we'll let them work that out. Okay, so,
Look at that. We got through another budget cycle, sort of ish.
Thank you.
Got in another
do
wire.
I need to log off and log back on to a different meeting?
Yes, it's a different link.